Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Discriminating Gamer. You know, I gotta tell you, I recently swallowed some food coloring, and they tell me I'll be fine, but I think I died a little inside. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at To Moscow, 1941 World War II Solitaire from Worthington. We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review. In To Moscow, 1941 World War II Solitaire from Worthington, the player takes on the role of the Wehrmacht as it advances into Russia in the hopes of toppling the communist regime. Now this is a book game, which means you require some dice, two different colored dice, as well as a pencil in order to play the game. So the game board is essentially a map of Russia. You have the Russian bot activations on the opposing page, and you have, of course, in addition to that main Russian board, you also have different other fronts. You have the Arctic front, the North Africa front, the Middle East front. You've also got what Great Britain is doing. Now, all these different fronts have different kind of figures, both Axis and Allies that can come into play. You also have the Arctic front with the German submarines, the British cargo ships, and then, of course, you have Britain itself with a number of air power that it can contribute to the battle. Now, at the beginning of every turn, you roll a die to determine your resource points. Now, your resource points tell you how many actions you get that turn. You're only ever going to get a maximum of 4, and you could potentially only get 1. On your turn, you tick off the turn number. You have 20 turns total in the game. You tick off the turn number, and then you write that in which front you want to advance on. Now, in Russia, you can advance north from Lenin, or from Finland toward Leningrad. That's the Finnish front. But then you have the German Army Group North front, you have the Army Group Center front, and you have the Army Group South front. Now you're advancing toward specific lines. Essentially what you do is you're rolling a die to try to beat the number in that in the city you're going to, in the section you're going to. Now, there may be some DRMs that pop up along the way, but you essentially write what you're going to do. You select your target on the board. Now, in addition to selecting those advances in Russia, you can also choose to activate some of your characters in these other fronts by circling them, bringing them into the battle. You can also take a chance at shooting down British planes that have been brought into the battle at this time. Now, as you're trying to advance, as I say, you're trying to roll the die in order to get that number to get through. But before you actually do it, before you take any actions, after you have selected your action, but before you carry it through, you have to see what the Russians are doing. You're rolling 2 die. You know, you roll a white die, it's a number 1, and then you've got combinations of black die that tell you which counter-response you're going to get from the Russians. And the Russians may do funky things to you. And, of course, it's not just the Russians. You may have allies activated in these other theaters where they're circled, they're active, they're there. But the Russians may do all sorts of nasty things to try to blunt you. They may give you DRMs that are negative to you. There may be some positive things that happen, but generally they're fighting against you, and that's how they do it. So next, you're rolling the die, and you are, if you're successful, if you get a greater number than the city you're going into, you shade that number to show that you are there with your pencil. That's where you are. Now, if you advance and there's a choice of tracks, you can pick one of those tracks, but then you can't go to the other one. You can only go off of your furthest extent. So sometimes some of your options may be whittled down as you advance further and further into Russia. Now, as you're marking off your advance on these army groups, occasionally you'll come to a red box. So what the red box means is you have to go through that if you want to go forward, but you don't get to advance. Essentially, you're bringing up supplies, you're refitting. So you have to go ahead and mark that off just in order to get ahead. But you then can go ahead, and if you're in a blue box, that means you get a +1 DRM for advancing. Now, each mission in this book gives you specific operational goals. So you're trying to get to those goals, and again, you've only got 20 turns to do it. And meanwhile, these other theaters are active, and the bot's working against you. Sometimes it may say you lose activation, so you have to actually cross out boxes. So you only got a limited number of boxes, and when you lose activations, that can be very damaging. The games are a little bit different. The basics are the same, but the different operational goals really matter. So you're trying to achieve the specific operational goal. Now, if you manage to achieve that specific operational goal, then you win the game. But of course, if you fail to reach that specific operational goal, then you fail. And it might be a matter of how big you win, how much you fail. But if you can succeed in achieving your operational goal for that specific game, then you win. On to Moscow, 1941 World War II Solitaire. So I am a big fan of these book games. I've reviewed a few of them so far, and I love how simple and light they are and quick they are. Now there's a lot of chance, because there's a lot of die rolling here, but fortunately these games are quick. These games are super quick, and they're super fun for what they are. They really give you a sense of dread every time you roll the die for the bot. What are they going to do? Or indeed, when you roll the die for the resources. How many actions am I going to get this turn? How many activations am I going to get? It matters. It's a fun and interesting way to play a military game without an opponent, just through the pen, the book, and your die. It's just super fun. Now, having said all that, I will say this: this particular game, On to Moscow, it's fun and I enjoyed it, and I will be giving it a buy it recommendation. Having said that, there is something I want to comment on, and I've commented on this before. Today, I'm currently teaching a course on Nazi Germany, and today in my course, as I'm recording this, I was actually talking about the Einsatzgruppen in Russia, and then the creation of the death camps. And I don't know, I'm developing less of a tolerance, I think, for abstracting games like this in my mind, where you play the Germans. Now, that's not to say I won't play the Germans in a World War II game. I don't think I'd ever get to that point. But it becomes something I'm more aware of as I play it. And frankly, I think more about what actually happened beyond just the military scope of mass murder in Russia and in Eastern Europe. And I don't mean to be preachy. I really don't. But it's something, I just want to let you know, it's something I'm aware of. And it's something any rational person would find distasteful. But it becomes a little bit harder for me to get excited about, I want to beat Russia. It's like, well, that wouldn't have been a good thing. That's just the point I wanted to make. That aside, it's a fun game. It's a good game. It's a well-constructed game, and I enjoyed it. I don't know that I liked it as well as some of the other games I played. Specifically, I think Waterloo was probably my favorite, but I really enjoy On to Moscow. So recommendation for the discriminating gamer for On to Moscow is buy it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We'd ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. And I'd ask you to please check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history and books on history. And I'm actually publishing some of my lectures on that channel, so please check that out as well. We'd also ask you to please give a thumb to this video on Board Game Geek. We really appreciate that. You know, I got to tell you something. My girlfriend thinks I don't give her enough privacy. At least that's what she writes in her diary. Please somebody help me on my feet again. And I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band.
The board game market is doing great, kid. Keep buying.